All 6 of them were either leaned against the wall by the back exit or leaning on my car. I stood in that doorway and I knew if I turned around and went back inside, they'd just wait. And I knew that if I kept walking toward my car, I might not make it home. I was 18 years old, alone, and the man who had spent months telling me we were destined to be together was walking toward me now, arms open, his friends whooping behind him. Let me tell you how we got there. It was the summer of 2013. I was 18, freshly graduated from high school, and I had just started my first real job at a small health food store in my downtown area. The owner was easygoing, a big hippie, flexible, with hours. At first, I worked different shifts. Eventually, I settled into afternoons through close. Because the store was small, I was almost always alone. My boss would stop in occasionally to grab something off the shelf, stay maybe 30 minutes, then leave. That was it. The building next door was subsidized housing, people recently released from incarceration, or those just trying to get back on their feet. The evening hours in that area were considered genuinely risky for young women alone. The restaurants nearby made a point of having male staff walk female employees to their cars. Assaults after dark weren't rare. They were expected. I had parking right outside the back exit, just a few feet from the door, and I held on to that like it was protection. But the front register was positioned with my back to a large window that faced the sidewalk directly. I would be ringing someone up or counting the drawer and catch movement in my peripheral vision and turn to find a man standing on the other side of the glass, a foot away, just watching. It wasn't uncommon, and I never reported it to anyone. I was young. I was inexperienced. I didn't understand yet that my discomfort was data worth acting on. One morning, I picked up a shift during the local farmers market. More customers than usual, better energy. I was genuinely happy to be there. That was the morning I met Cam. He came in carrying a brochure for an event at a spiritual center nearby. Asked if we'd post it at the register. I smiled, said, "Sure, got the owner's permission." He seemed relaxed, a little high. Nothing alarming. I talked to him for maybe 5 minutes and didn't think about him again for the rest of the day. He came back on my next shift. He positioned himself at the register and stayed. I was polite, but I was trying to work. Dropping hints, walking away to restock shelves, keeping myself moving. He followed me through the store, commenting on how gorgeous my legs were. Telling me that the first time he'd seen me, the sun behind my head had made my hair glow like a halo. He said I'd caused a spiritual awakening in him. He was convinced I had been flirting with him, that my being kind was a signal, that we had something rare and undeniable. I was creeped out. I was also 18 and had never had anyone look at me that way before. I thanked him for the compliments instead of shutting it down. I kept making excuses about needing to focus. He kept following. I told him he was loitering and needed to make a purchase or leave. The store carried mostly organic and specialty items. I assumed the prices would push him out. Instead, he started buying 1 soda or 1 piece of candy every hour. $3. Enough to keep calling himself a customer. I called my boss from the bathroom. I explained what was happening, that a man was using cheap purchases as an excuse to stay in the store all shift, that he was making me uncomfortable, that I was scared. My boss was someone who talked openly about feminism, about consent, about boundaries. I expected her to back me up. She told me the store was struggling financially, that any money coming in mattered. She told me I was overthinking it, that Cam was a kind soul who had found a genuine connection with me, and that his presence was actually good energy for the store. I was on my own. I didn't quit. It was my first job, and I was about to start community college. Flexible hours were hard to find. I kept showing up, and things kept escalating. Cam started bringing me flowers every day. He left long handwritten notes, confessing love, telling me we were soulmates, that our connection was cosmically ordained. Then he started playing the Great Gatsby soundtrack. The Leonardo DiCaprio film had just come out that summer, and he became fixated on it. He told me he was Gatsby. He told me I was Daisy. He said we were living out the story in real life, but that our ending would be different. Our souls would finally come together. He had a look in his eyes when he talked about it that I can only describe as crazed, fixed, certain. Then he stopped using my name. He just called me Daisy. When other customers came in and I turned my attention to them, he'd get visibly angry, jealous. He started calling himself my bodyguard. Said it was his duty to confront anyone who looked at me the wrong way or threatened what he called our love. For a few weeks he disappeared. I thought maybe it was over. Then he came back and told me he'd been hospitalized, and the whole routine started again. Then I got a text from an unknown number. It was Cam. He'd gotten my number from a coworker by lying. Told them he'd lost my contact and needed it back. And somewhere along the way, he'd done a reverse address search and found where I lived. He was on the other side of town, no car, no bus route between us. As far as I know, he never came to my house. But I can't say for certain that he didn't. I didn't block his number. I was scared. He knew where I lived. He was so entrenched in the belief that we belonged together that I genuinely didn't know what cutting contact would trigger. So I answered occasionally, kept things curt. He didn't take the hint. When my semester started, it got worse. He told me he wanted to introduce me to his friends. First, by having me come to his apartment. When I refused, he brought them to the store instead. 5 of them. They told me Cam was a good guy, a little dramatic. Someone who liked playing out fantasies but harmless. They told me I should give him a chance. A few days later, Cam told me he was worried about my safety during the darker evening hours. He said his friends would stand posted outside the front and back of the store to make sure I got home safe. And they did. 6 men in my store now, each cycling through the same hourly purchase routine to justify their presence. All of them calling themselves my protection. The exits, front and back, covered. I grew up in a home with a lot of dysfunction, a lot of compliance, a lot of learning to keep your head down and not make things worse. That pattern didn't go away just because the setting changed. I didn't know how to fight what was happening. I just tried to survive each shift. My routine became close the registers, lock the front door, shut off the lights so they couldn't see inside, and wait. 2 hours in the dark until I was sure they'd moved on. It worked for a week. Then one night, I stepped out the back exit, and every single one of them was right there. Some leaned against the wall by the door. Others leaned against my car, smoking and drinking. Cam walked toward me with his arms open and his friends cheering him on. He smelled like alcohol and weed. I thought they were going to take me with them. I hit my car alarm. The sound was loud enough to startle them, just for a second. And that second was all I needed. I got to the door, got the key in, got inside, locked it, and I floored it out of that parking lot without looking back. The next day, I called my boss and told her I was done. No notice, just done. And even then, even after all of that, I still didn't tell anyone what had happened. Cam kept texting, new numbers when I blocked the old ones. His messages got darker as I stopped responding. He started sending texts in the middle of the night letting me know he was watching my house, that he was still my protector, still keeping me safe. One of his friends was driving him across town to sit outside my home in the dark. Then it all stopped. 6 months of silence. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in a year. Then a call from a number I didn't recognize. I was in school by then, doing group projects. Lots of unknown numbers coming through. I picked up. It was Cam. He told me he'd violated his parole and had spent the last 6 months in jail. He said he had thought about me every single day. He said I was his daisy and he was coming for me. He described in explicit detail what our reunion was going to look like, what he was going to do, what he was certain I would feel, how he'd imagined it playing out every night in his cell. He said I didn't have a choice in the matter anymore. I told him I was going abroad to study. In 2 weeks. He started screaming that I was running from our connection, that it didn't matter where I went, that he would find me. I hung up. I threw away the phone and got a new one with a new number. I deleted my Facebook, and I moved to a city an hour away and started over. I had to upend my entire life. A new city, a new number, a deleted profile. All of it because one man decided that my being polite to him for 5 minutes meant we were cosmically bound. I want to be clear about something. I made mistakes. I was 18 and I had no framework for recognizing what was happening or knowing how to stop it early. I didn't report him to the police. I didn't document anything. I didn't quit sooner. I didn't tell my parents, my friends, anyone. I answered texts I should have ignored. I stayed in a job that was no longer safe because I was afraid of how it would look on a resume. None of that made what he did acceptable. But I say it because I want anyone younger than me, reading this or hearing this, to understand the things I wish I'd done exist, and you can do them. As for Cam, I don't know what happened to him after that call. I moved. I cut the threads. I never heard from him again. That wasn't the last time I had to deal with someone like this. At the larger university I transferred to, a man who had moved from my old college found me on campus. He had a fixation of his own, but an unusual one. He wanted to be the subject of a stalker. He'd track me down at the student union and describe in specific detail how attracted he was to the idea of someone obsessing over him, finding him, following him. He targeted me because I fit whatever idea he'd built in his head. A big campus at least gave me options. I got friends to help me track his patterns so I could avoid him. I was 18 when this started. I didn't have the language for what was happening to me, and the one adult I tried to report it to told me his money was more valuable than my safety. That shaped how long it went on. What I know now is that the gut feeling I kept dismissing, the unease, the edge, the sense that something was wrong, was correct every single time. I just hadn't been taught to trust it. I'd been taught to be polite, to not make a scene, to give people the benefit of the doubt. The doubt is not always a gift. If you are in a situation that is eroding your sense of safety, document it. Tell someone outside the situation. Don't wait for it to escalate to the point where you're hiding in a dark store for 2 hours, hoping a group of men will leave. That's not a gut feeling anymore. That's your whole body telling you to go. I'm glad the worst didn't happen. I'm not sure how, but I'm glad. If this one stayed with you, if you recognized something in it, or if you've carried your own version of a story like this, drop it in the comments. I read them. I'll help someone else find this who might need it. And if you want to be here for what comes next, subscribe. I'll keep telling these stories as long as people need to hear them.